Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome in coast to coast across Canada for another exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And you may know this is exciting for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's February. Our entire month solely dedicated to amazing women in STEM. If you want to check out by month's end over 55 broadcasts we will have done in this month featuring some of the coolest women on planet Earth, you can head to our YouTube channel and do just that. There's lots to explore and discover: neuroscientists, deep sea divers, cave explorers. It's been a wild month and a ton of fun. But if you've been joining us this week, you'll know that we're on a special series as well. We are back in conjunction with the amazing folks at Environment and Climate Change Canada for our Changing Planet series number 2. A few months ago, we did an amazing 5-part series with some of their incredible scientists, and we are on part 4 of 5 this week, featuring some really cool ladies from coast to coast across the country. Just yesterday, we hung out with Kim Daw here in Corner Brook, where I am, which is really freaky, to talk about caribou and poo. We've talked about water, we've talked about specimens, and today we're going to learn a little bit about how all that data collection can lead to change. Science should be a tool that is used to influence policy and to make the world a bit of a better place. And today we're going to hang out with Paige, who's going to take us on a little bit of a journey of her job doing just that. She has a wide and varied career. We're going to learn a lot about it. We're doing our first Prezi together in a long time, which is kind of fun. It's my favorite way of showcasing your presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to zip my lip. I'm going to bring in Paige. Paige, thank you so much for joining us as part of this series. It's so exciting to have you.
Hi. Awesome. Thanks. Really happy to be here.
Well, I'll leave you to it. I'll put myself in the background and you can take us away.
Sounds great. All right. So I'll dive in here with my presentation. So just a little bit about me. I'm 24 years old. I'm a physical science specialist with Environment and Climate Change Canada, and my hometown is just outside of Toronto in Oakville. So what really got me interested in science, I was always really curious about the world around me and found myself asking the question why to just about everything. So for me, there was no specific moment, I would say, or event that brought me into science. It was really just my curiosity and drive to learn new things to answer that simple yet complicated why question. And personally, nobody in my family works in the field of science, so the avenue that I learned more about it was through school, of course, reading lots of books and watching some science YouTube videos. Yes, YouTube can sometimes be educational, although I don't necessarily want to encourage more screen time, but maybe a shift in what we are spending our time watching. And even to this day, I still watch crash course YouTube videos to learn about some random science topics. So as I got older, I became more motivated to want to study in the field of science and create a career out of it, but I didn't quite know exactly what I wanted to get into. So in high school, I took a little bit of everything, including biology, chemistry, and physics, and eventually decided to pursue a degree in chemistry at the University of Waterloo. So the best part of this degree for me was that there was a co-op component to it, which is a program that's designed not only for students to study in classrooms and by reading textbooks, but to actually get the opportunity to try out different jobs in the field. And there are many ways that you can do this through co-ops offered in different high schools, college programs, and other government-funded programs, not just through university. And so I had one of my first co-op jobs with Environment Canada, and it was actually in a totally different area than where I currently work. So I was in a research lab as a laboratory technician, studying air quality samples across Canada as a way of measuring air pollution and more. And this was an amazing opportunity for me to learn and put my education into practice, but I couldn't really help but feel that the lab was not necessarily the place that I was going to end up for my entire career. And I really would never have known this until I tried. So this got me exploring some different options where I came across a very unique program and opportunity to study both science and business. And this really caught my eye, especially because growing up, I always saw those two worlds as very separate and different things. But turns out that these worlds are super connected. And this was a challenge to think a little bit differently, an opportunity to combine practical business skills with subject expertise in the sciences, working to bridge that gap in knowledge, communication, and capability, the things that we want and are able to do between the two fields. So I went on to find one of my later co-op positions as a student with Environment and Climate Change Canada again, but this time working for the Meteorological Service of Canada, essentially the weather people. And I am still here 3 years later. So, what does the Meteorological Service of Canada do? We provide Canadians with accurate and timely weather, water, climate, and environmental information, weather forecasts, and warnings to help them make decisions about their health, safety, and well being. So, our data is sent out 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I'll actually just go back here. This picture here, you can see that we collect our data from our networks. Then we use some supercomputers that are used to analyze the data. And then we develop some forecasts and warnings, which are then made available to the public and then sent straight to you guys. So we have many different types of networks, such as the weather stations on land. If you ever drive by and you see a big white soccer ball looking thing, like the picture on the bottom there, it might be a weather radar. We have marine-based observations that come from something we call buoys, and even satellite-based observations that are super cool, and they take pictures and provide us data from space. So there are many different groups of workers, ranging from those to the people who collect the data, analyze the data, and those who make models and weather predictions, as well as those who communicate and inform Canadians of changes in the environment or potential high impact weather events. So, a little bit about my job as a physical scientist. I work for a division. It's called the Transformation, Innovation, and Engineering Division. And it's a group that helps with the continuous improvement of the weather and climate observing networks. So, we used future focused innovation planning, creating recommendations and guidance that's based on scientific evidence. And we work to sort of manage and maximize collaboration between all those different groups of people that I mentioned earlier. So we essentially act as the bridge between science research, like new technology testing, for example, policy, which means a strategy or action that is proposed by a government to sort of guide decisions and actions, and then operations, which is the day-to-day activities carried out by our networks to deliver the weather data to all of our users, including you guys. So my job consists of three main parts. The first one is science communications. So this is things like planning events and workshops, which can even be on an international scale, presenting information to big and small audiences, and making recommendations to decision makers. Then we have research and reports, and this is not so much the lab kind, but rather looking into comparing what other countries do for their weather services and comparing it to what we do in Canada. And we call that international benchmarking. This part of my job allows me to reach out, communicate, and collaborate from people around the world, which is super cool. And then we have a little bit of project management. So we set goals and deadlines for our projects. We choose to use specific strategies to accomplish things, and we track our progress. And sometimes we need to adjust what our plans are and do a little bit of problem solving in there. And of course, this involves a lot of meetings to bring different groups of people together. And in doing this, we're always planning ahead for the future as well. And I just have another slide here with something that I think is very important. And we have a quote that says, "Science isn't finished until it's communicated." And we can see the picture of the scientists on the left talking about apples, probably using a bunch of technical terms that nobody understands. And then we have everybody else on the right thinking that they're talking about oranges. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is that if we can't communicate our science properly, then it has very little value. So I'll get into a few Environment and Climate Change Canada projects that I'm currently working on. So an example would be the environmental sustainability of our weather networks. So this is an international initiative through the WMO. So that's the World Meteorological Organization. It's kind of like the WHO, the World Health Organization, who made public health decisions over the COVID pandemic, but it's for meteorology. And Canada has the lead on this file, specifically my director and my team. So we're looking at international engagement and collaboration to come up with solutions to reduce the environmental footprint of our current networks and maybe potentially old school ways of doing things. So my team has done many activities in the past couple of years to advance this initiative, and that includes an international survey that was sent out to collect information from countries that are involved with the WMO as kind of like a starting point for the initiative to see where everybody was at. Then we had a virtual international workshop that was just hosted this past fall that really got the conversation going on an international scale. And we've also had attendance at events at multiple international conferences, including a presentation in Paris, France, that my director went to in 2022. There was also a panel discussion in Geneva, Switzerland in 2023, and presentations in the United States that was just a couple of weeks ago that I was actually able to attend and give a presentation at. So you may be thinking, okay, that's cool, but how does it involve me? So, well, now that we know that more scientific data leads to more informed decisions and actions, one of the ways that you can get involved is through community science projects. So you can help collect data and communicate science. An example of one of these programs is something called COCORAS Canada. And this is actually a nonprofit volunteer network of weather observers of all ages and backgrounds measuring and mapping precipitation. So we're talking like rain and snow in their communities. So volunteers use low-cost measurement tools and are educated and trained to create a little mini network in their community that provides high-quality data to a large variety of users. So there's a web page which I've linked here, which provides the ability for observers to see their data and their observations mapped out in real time. And it also has a lot of other valuable information there as well. So what's kind of required? An enthusiasm for watching and reporting weather conditions, a desire to learn about how weather can affect and impact our lives, and of course, a COCORAS approved rain gauge. We need a specific tool. There's a registration link on the bottom in case anybody is interested in obtaining one of those tools and using it maybe in the classroom. And a willingness to take measurements in the mornings. It's actually between the hours of 6 and 10 a.m. So I know school starts around maybe 9 o'clock-ish. So it could be like a morning activity. But anybody really can do this if they want to. And COCORAS data is used by a wide variety of organizations and individuals. That includes Environment Canada, park conservation authorities, emergency managers, insurance people, engineers, farmers, teachers, students, and even neighbors in the community are just some of the examples of people who can use this data. And if I can leave you guys with one quote to sort of wrap up the presentation here, it'll be from someone you all have maybe heard of, which is Albert Einstein. And that is that with any science, the important thing is to not stop questioning. Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Paige. That was fantastic. If you want to come out of screen share, I think you can see me again with your setup, but make sure we can have a bit of a conversation. YouTubers, email questions, anyone wants to come in with queries, please do. We had a bunch throughout the presentation. One of the first ones was about something you talked about at the very beginning. So YouTube channels. A lot of our students, of course, on YouTube a lot. You mentioned Crash Courses, one of my all-time favorite, amazing resource for people wanting to learn about pretty much any topic imaginable. But are there any other recommendations you'd give to students that are starting to learn these things online or really keen on science or engineering?
Yeah. Crash Course is probably my number one. That's something that I actually used to get me through university. But they have an amazing history of cartoon-based stuff that makes science really, really fun. And the way that they dissect the information and go into it and sort of explain things on a simple level and then slowly take it into some more detail and more complicated concepts, I think is really great. There's not one that comes to the top of my mind right now, but I'd be happy to share as I
if you think of any others, you can always message us. We can get it to the rest of these classes. I'll do a quick plug. SciShow is created by the same people that made Crash Course, and it's also amazing. And a buddy of ours that's been on a broadcast for Natural World Facts are like amazing deep sea things. If you're keen on really weird things at the bottom of the ocean, there's a lot there. And of course, there's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants has over 3,000 broadcasts with amazing scientists and explorers around planet Earth. So check us out. Thanks for that, Paige. Yeah, and can't recommend Crash Course enough. It's a really, really great tool. So speaking of SciComm, you talked about the importance of communicating science, and you've done a wide array of this in your career. Are there SciComm tips for students that might want to be getting into our career of sharing sort of the magic and wonder of science? Is there anything you recommend that they do or learn or practice with? What's your tips?
Definitely. So one of the best things to do in communicating your science, I would say, is to keep things simple. We want to avoid scientific jargon, which is things like using very technical terms that people who don't study or work in that field may not understand. So taking things to a level that's a little bit more basic and using simple sentences and words that everybody understands and knows is the best way to get your point across and to really communicate what it is that you're trying to say.
Yeah. And this is worth noting that it's not dumbing it down. It's just not going with hardcore. And, you can explain orbital mechanics, which is a very tricky science, in a way that highlights the story behind it and is fascinating and gets people inspired to want to learn the complex math behind that without leading with, well, you need to know this intense calculus to do orbital mechanics, right? There's a bit of nuance there, and it's a tricky field. SciComm is fairly new as a discipline.
Yeah.
So many.
I would even add that it's not, like you said, it's not called dumbing it down. It's called making it accessible. So we want to make our science accessible to everybody so that everybody can understand and learn new things without feeling, less than or like they're not understanding what it is you're trying to say.
Thank you for that, Paige. It's such an important thing, and it's something that a lot of our speakers obviously try and aspire to. So I'm glad we got to touch on that point. To the specifics of Coco Ross, because we've talked about this twice in this series this week. Are these free? Are they? Do you know how much they cost? If someone wants to get one of these certified rain gauges, what's the deal? Do we have?
So let's click on this link here, maybe.
Yes.
And I could even share my screen to show you
the website. Yeah. Let's go on a little journey together. I kind of want one of these personally.
Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. We're actually looking at, in my job right now, how to increase this volunteer network. Ooh. So we're looking at strategies in order to get more volunteers and sort of advertise these types of things and programs as something that maybe schools can do, retirement homes, that kind of thing, because you don't have to be a meteorologist to do this whatsoever. So I have the website pulled up here. I will share my screen again.
And talk to me when we're done this broadcast, because I'd love to link in our school network to get a ton of people in on this fun thing, because I want it. I'm in Cornerbrook, Newfoundland. We get 13 feet of snow a year. So the chances of getting to highlight that would be kind of fun. Look at this.
Yeah, so we have the CocoRa's Canada website, and what CocoRa's actually stands for is Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and the Snow Network. So we have a few links here. Cool. It's a nonprofit organization, of course. Yeah. You can see there's an online registration form, and you do have to purchase the rain gauge. Yeah. So there's a shop here that we can click on. It says $30. There you go. Subsidized price to volunteer.
There you go. How exciting is that? I'm going to get one of those.
This is what it looks like.
Very fun. Paige, thank you for doing a little deep dive with us. That's awesome. And we will, honestly, like you and I could chat after this and see if we can get some of our classes on this, because that would be a lot of fun. All right. Back to weather. Speaking of rain, snow, and hail, you highlighted that we've got weather stations like the big orbs, we've got buoys, we've got satellites. I have one of the big orbs right up the street from me, actually, which is kind of fun. It's like the best climbing destination. How many of these do we have across Canada? Do we have a figure of sort of weather networks coast to coast?
Yes. So there are many different networks. There is a surface network, an upper air network, a marine network, a lightning network, and a radar network. And I believe there's around 30 radars across Canada, and that's one of the main sources of weather data that we observe. This network was actually recently totally renewed, so that's pretty awesome. It was a really big project, but they stayed on time and on budget, which was really, really great and difficult to do. But the other networks vary. Part of the environmental sustainability initiative actually came about because we went to one of these WMO Congress meetings, and they wanted to mandate that each country provides upper air observations within a distance of, I believe, 200 kilometers apart. Now, this is a really difficult thing to do in Canada because we have a very, very large country with a relatively small population that's mostly on the border of the United States at the bottom. So the North Pole and things like that don't have a lot of people to make these observations. So not only do we have capacity or people restraints, but also when you think about all of these different stations everywhere, there's a lot that goes into making these observations. And, you know, let's say we have to fly all the way up to the North Pole to maintain these networks and stuff like that. So there is environmental sustainability implications that come along with adding more and more stations, right? So we wanted to sort of create this initiative to also address, you know, data is really important, and more data is good, but how much do we need, and how does that relate back to environmental sustainability? So that was kind of the basis for that project.
By the way, you speak about going up to the Arctic to check out these weather stations. In our first program in this series, Elizabeth Jameson talked about one of her colleagues, and there's her like with a plane out on the Arctic. I think they're on a glacier, and she's like walking up a mountain to this little station to like open it up. I mean, that is some dedicated science. And by the way, thank you for throwing in a plug in there for anyone who's sort of, you know, iffy on government projects. To say on time and on budget is like amazing. So that's a sneak thing in there into the broadcast
Yeah,
today.
exactly.
Paige, with your education, one of the questions we got was there any experience that you had that was particularly meaningful in the sense of like our students are going into university in the not too distant future or college perhaps, and so if they're to do that, was there something, whether it's like a co-op thing or working with people or anything that really jumped out as being impactful and meaningful as your path to this career?
Yeah, so that experiential co-op experience was probably the biggest thing that I plug and recommend to all the students is get out there and try these jobs, right? Because I started in a full chemistry based program, and I did some lab work and I had a really great time doing it, but I just once I did it, I couldn't see myself being there for the rest of my career. It just wasn't the path for me, and I never would have known that unless I tried. So being able to get these student positions, and it doesn't have to be a co-op program, it can be like a summer job, a volunteer thing, but really allowing yourself to test try these different careers is something that can be pivotal because it can, you know, lead you down the path to obtain a full chemistry degree, or maybe add a little bit of something, or even change programs completely, which I know a lot of people do, and it's not something that anybody should be ashamed of, because you're going to be doing this career for the rest of your life, and so you might as well do something that you enjoy.
I'm so glad you talked about this. Every time we get the chance to talk about co-op, I can't encourage this enough for students. Again, whether we've got Paige on or astronauts or mathematicians, whatever, the amount of people that are like, the schooling is very important. Like going to school, getting the education, going to those classes is a huge part of it. It's key. But the job that you end up doing will likely be radically different from your day-by-day work in school. And it seems a little daunting. I know when you're a student, the idea of like, oh, I'm going to do something totally different, I'm going to go work instead of go to class, feels kind of scary. But universally, like literally every single person we've ever brought on this program has talked about how important that experience was to them. So can't stress that enough. Go out, try these things, and see how you feel. Maybe you love it, maybe you hate it. But it's the act of doing it that counts. So very cool. Paige, I promise no bosses are listening to this, but one of our questions was if you're interested in trying any other things or new things next. Are there any things that you'd like to do in the Environment Canada or beyond?
That's a good question. I would be really open to trying new things. I don't want to sort of close any doors. I'm a big fan of keeping things open to opportunities. I think I'm in a very comfortable position right now. I really love my job. And through my co-op degree, I actually got the chance to try 5 different positions. So I've already feel like I've had a little bit of like wiggle room, and I've moved around a fair bit of experience here and there. So I found myself in a happy spot. But I wouldn't say that maybe a couple years down the road that I wouldn't want to try something different. I don't know.
That's a very nuanced answer, and I appreciate that, Paige. The one universal of our entire Changing Planet Series 2, which again, all our students should check out. It's been a fun ride. We got weather tomorrow to wrap up our 5-part mini-series, is that everyone really likes their job. I get the pleasure in this job of doing a lot of partnerships with Environment Canada. We've done Parks Canada things, we've done Canadian Space Agency, and I must say, like, I'm not being paid to say this, Canadian government jobs, everyone seems to really, really enjoy. Like, we've never had someone on that's like, I don't know, even after the broadcast. So there's some really cool careers out there, kids, and I hope you take the chance to look into some of them. It's always a pleasure to get to showcase people in really cool gigs. Paige, time flies when you're having fun. I want to take one final question, which is just, is there something, a last message you'd share with our kids? You did a little bit of this at the end of the presentation, but if our kids are going to take on one thing about using data for good or the diverse roles that you've had, is there anything that you want to wrap up the program with?
I would say just challenge maybe what you may normally think of science or business, and there's lots of connections between all of these different things. So like keep exploring, keep questioning, keep studying and learning new things. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, I would always recommend that they talk to somebody, right? So the best thing that you can do is ask questions for people who may be in the field, many different fields, and be open to trying new things.
Yeah. Scientists don't bite, and we've been talking about this all week long, both in this series and beyond. Like, if you're really keen on something, approach someone who has that career, and 99 times out of 100, they are more than happy to share their insight, share their experience. Like, we want to inspire a next generation of people to come in our roles or try something a little bit different. So always worth an ask. The worst you can get is no. Paige, thank you so much for your time, your passion, all of this. This has been so much fun. And again, I hope our kids check out the rest of our Changing Planet series. It's all on YouTube. If you want to share this with your family and friends, please do. Lots to explore and discover there. And with that, we will say farewell.